So you said you saw the new Doug Stanhope special, Discount Meat, I believe it's called, on YouTube. What did you think? I liked it quite a lot, actually. It wasn't the funniest special I've ever seen or anything like that. I wasn't laughing out loud and crying the whole time, but I did have a few laugh out loud moments. I was definitely chuckling the whole time and agreeing with most of what he said. And it was one of those where he has like those insights that, you know, that thing comedy does, or stand-up comedy specifically does, where it's like, these are thoughts you've had, you've just never organized them and made them quite as concise and funny as this. So you relate to it. It did that a decent amount throughout it for me. And I was enjoying it. One of the things I like about stand-up is, or his stand-up specifically, is that it is just about like telling stories and talking about your life and your ideas on things without getting up your own ass about it. Some comedians have that whole, you know, comedy's the modern day philosophy thing, but that's so pretentious and stupid. I don't ever recall Kant or Aristotle talking about how bad they are at sex or whatever, you know. But Stanhope's always been good at walking that line where it's not just jokey joke stuff, but it's still funny and it's still insightful and it's smart but not up its own ass. So I enjoyed it a lot. What do you think?
Yeah, I liked it. I really liked the format of it. I've always been a fan of his, and, you know, we mentioned the other day that, like, less so over the years, but I always kind of check for him. I like him. And I really liked the format. The format was creative. It reminds me of a lot of, like, visualizer type things that people are doing in the music industry at the moment. So I thought it was cool to see that in comedy, because I don't think I ever have seen that. And I feel like Stanhope's energy was perfect for that, because you have these like super nice shots of like a sort of living room type of setting, you know, and like nice colors. And then you've got the TV, and then Stanhope is on the TV. And so that's kind of low quality. You're seeing sort of a low quality image of Stanhope on a high quality shot, in context of a high quality shot. And that's just really cool. That's the type of aesthetics that I like. And I think it worked really well for Stanhope because it had a decently high production value, but then it allowed him to still be sort of old school and gritty. And just the way he looks with that suit in the context of that sort of old TV screen with the sort of wavy lines on it, you know, it just looks good. It fits his aesthetic, and it was a great way. That's the kind of stuff I like. It's like you take an aesthetic that's kind of from a bygone era and you find a way to reintroduce it to a new generation. And I liked that he did that. And the material I thought was pretty good. He started losing me a little bit in the second half. You know, I liked the first half a lot, and I thought pretty much all the jokes were good. I liked the high notes that he was doing, the sort of just out of context, random stuff that he was throwing out there. That's the kind of shit I like. And it reminded me of why I've always liked Stanhope. I feel like he thinks very similar to me. And when I was doing a little bit of stand-up, I always felt like I was kind of going off of Maron. Like Maron felt like the person that I was imitating the most, but then re-diving into Stanhope's style, that definitely was some influence there. And that's probably why stand-up didn't work super well for me, because it was like I was going for some of those edgier angles, but it's like you got to be really good at, you know, making jokes in order to make that shit work. And I think that's where Stanhope shines, is that like his sentiments are always honest, but then he always goes for the joke too, and he doesn't ruin his own material with his personal feelings about it, but it also doesn't feel like he's just writing jokes either. Like, this stuff comes from his real worldview. It comes from who he really is. And, you know, so some of the more ridiculous things that he says, like, I think all doctors should be treated like psychics. You know, that's really funny. That made me laugh when he said that. And it's also quite ignorant, but I am sure that at least on some level, Doug Stanhope totally believes that. Would he defend it, you know, like in a court of law? Like, no, but I bet you that's something that he believes. And I think that that is what sets him apart from the rest of stand-up. I mean, he's known for just being kind of a fuck off, and, you know, he's been doing it for all these years, and he had some shots at the big time, but I think he was just that type of guy that never really went for that. And, as Patrice O'Neill would put it, he was righteous. He's the truth, so he's just always going based off that. So even when he's doing some of these more like libertarian angles, it's like he just does it in a way that's honest. It's both intellectually honest and it's personally honest. And he's able to point out that, a lot of these small government libertarians and Republicans are doing a lot of bootlicking now just because the guy promising the biggest federal government that we've ever seen is a Republican. And that's a very apt thing to point out. He's right to point that out. I thought towards the end it got a little bit, sort of like old man yells at cloud. He did do a lot of he did a whole part where he was like, I feel like stand-up is the last bastion of free speech and the, blah, blah, blah. So he definitely, and he did a whole angle about cancel culture too, I think. It wasn't the least crusty stand-up I've heard, but he's an older guy. Oh, that was the thing that pissed me off, is that he is now the 4th or 5th comedian from his generation, male comedian from his generation, to use the exact same premise that abortion is actually murder. And to bounce off that, well, listen, you could support it or not support it, but it is murder. And just taking that for granted. I have heard at least 5 comedians his age use that premise now. And I'm so fucking sick of it because, it takes for granted something that's just not true. There's a reason that's in contention is because it's not true. And he says it himself. He says, is a cluster of cancer cells, if you eradicate that, is that fucking murder as well? And the answer is obviously no. But the truth is, it's closer to that. If you're talking about a literal fetus, especially in the earliest days of a pregnancy, you're literally talking about a cluster of cells. You're in no way talking about a human person, doesn't have a brain, doesn't have a heart. That's why they say heartbeat, because there's no heart there. It's just, it's a pulse that is going through this cluster of cells as it is building itself into something resembling a human. And so it strikes me that there's better angles on abortion, man. Bill Burr, Louis C.K., Mark Maron, fucking Doug Stanhope, and I think there's at least one more that have done that exact same angle on abortion. And I just get annoyed every time I hear it. It's like that's where the righteous truth teller gig kind of hits the wall, because it's like, man, is that really what we need? Is that really what society needs to hear right now? A few years ago, 10 years ago, those jokes would have been edgier and more interesting and less offensive, frankly. But now, the reason it's offensive is because it's like you're kind of rubbing salt in the wound, and it's like you're also giving credence to something, to the justification that they have used to strip that right away from people. You're just going on stage and you're just taking that for granted. Yeah, well, abortion's murder, but also this. I hate that. It's not true. I hate that we have ceded that ground as a society. And, I can't blame fucking 50-something-year-old men for taking that angle in their stand-up, taking crusty-ass angles in their stand-up. But that was the part where I started to get annoyed with him.
I thought he had some interesting insights. One of the things I thought interesting was where he was talking about Roseanne and him being good friends. I was like, uh-oh. But then he, did the thing where he still, respected her and gave her the credit she's due, because back in the day, she actually was a very progressive, good comedian. She's just lost her mind recently. But then he calls that out and talks about how she's crazy about that, and he called her out on it. And, she's going on the whole QAnon spree to him, and he's just like, well, do you really think that's possible? And then I think she says, you don't think so? I might have to rethink some things or whatever. And he makes a joke about how easy it was to, turn someone around on that. And I think, honestly, he got lucky with that because, one, she respected him. But, a lot of those people, will easily believe these ridiculous, crazy conspiracy theories because it aligns with what they want to believe, their right-wing beliefs. And it's clear that Roseanne's right-wing beliefs were creeping up on her, and she thought she was progressive, but then she just bought into these conspiracy theories because it justified those theories for, not to get too off subject from his stand-up special, but I think that's what it is with a lot of these right-wing people that do believe these crazy QAnon things, is just because, well, it backs up your belief and it aligns with, oh, you are not the bad guy, everything's fine, there's this insane pedophile ring or this and that going on, and this person that you want to like but shouldn't is actually helping suss out these people and stuff. So I thought that was cool, and it's a little funny, but she had that quote to him, how do we do stand-up comedy when there's no truth left? And that one hits a little home, like he called out there too, is like, it is true, and like everything is so ridiculous. Like, I know this wasn't her point, but like, how do you even satirize anything? That's why, like, when I did start doing stand-up again a couple years ago, I didn't want to do anything political, even though I have a lot of thoughts about the current climate of things. But because it's like, that stuff's not even funny anymore. How do you make jokes out of it? How do you satirize this? What's even real? And I don't know. I liked his whole point on that, and is talking about, like, I think he referenced 9/11, the invasion of Iraq. He's like, well, you didn't have a third party come out saying there is no invasion, and Iraq exists on the other side of the planet, and this and that. And like, I don't know. I thought all that was good. I thought he did a good job of evolving in the right ways and staying sane in the right ways. Like, you know, he still had his calling bullshit on stuff beliefs and a little bit of grouchy old man beliefs, but wasn't buying into like the party line of bullshit. I didn't catch much of that cancel culture stuff as you were mentioning, and the abortion thing. I don't know. Maybe I need to rewatch that. I might have not caught it right or taken it the wrong way, but I agree with you on that point about that take on abortion, that, oh yeah, it's murder, I just don't care, because a lot of comedians have made that. I thought he was saying the opposite. I thought his comparing it, and he called himself out on it being an old take, because he said steal something from myself 20 years ago, and then compares it to, yeah, it's a living thing that you're killing, but so is this cluster of cancer cells. I thought he was saying that it's no different than that. Not that he would also do that, but like yeah, sure, the fetus is alive, but it's alive in the way cancer cells are. It's not a person, so it's okay. I think that's what he was getting at. I might be wrong, but I didn't take away from that what you did, and I hope I'm right, just because I like Doug Stanhope, and I was a little worried about watching the special and what his takes on things were going to be now, but I walked away from it feeling like they were pretty decent. So, and yeah, you're right. He did hedge a little bit on the abortion is murder thing, and he did say a similar thing about the cancer cells and how, you know, that's technically alive, but blah, blah, blah. But he also said abortion is murder. That was sort of the hinge point of the angle there, and that's the verbiage that I take issue with, because a lot of comedians, the premise of their joke is taking those words at face value. Yes, abortion is murder, but here's my like caveat, you know, and the acknowledging and accepting as true that abortion is murder is the part that I take issue with, because we're ceding ground. That is a non-true, non-fact-based argument that the right wing, and specifically the religious right wing, makes in order to strip women of their abortion rights. And so comedians, these brave truth tellers, going on stage to make that point for them, they're helping them. Even if they're making their little sardonic points about killing cancer cells, it's like you're still ceding the framing of abortion being murder, which it's not. Oh yeah, I forgot about the Roseanne thing. That was a really interesting part of the special. And you're right that quote, how are we supposed to do stand-up when there's no truth anymore? That's exactly it. That rings home super hard. And I'll get back to that in a second. But the whole thing about how her whole thing fell apart as soon as Stanhope said, are you sure that's true? Do you really think that's possible? She's like, well, now that you say that, I don't know.
And like, it's probably just because that was Doug Stanhope, right? Like, that's probably somebody that she thought she could let all this shit fly, and he would be on that same page. But then for that guy, right, who almost kind of like exemplifies punk rock in comedy, you know, for him to be like, what? You know, that is probably like, well, if you don't think it's true, then I don't know. So I think that gets to another theory that I have, that like, I think a lot of people's politics, if they're not sourced from the people in your community, they're at least heavily affected by the people in your community. Like, where people consider themselves to be on the political spectrum has a lot to do with who you talk to every day. And I don't know, that's probably a theory to get into at a different time. But it's something I've noticed moving to California, is that like, I don't think my beliefs have changed, but my orientation and the people that I'm talking to on a regular basis has changed. And so it's changed the way that I talk about things, you know? And I don't know, it's kind of a dialectical thing. That's sort of what Hegel was getting at a little bit. But anyway, back to the thing about how are we supposed to do comedy when there's no truth anymore. The thing about that to me is that it feels profoundly sad. There's a true sadness there, not just because of the sentiment that she was expressing, but the fact that it's a little crazy that you and I can agree with Roseanne Barr on that exact point, right? Like, if Roseanne Barr, one of these people who, like you said, is wrapped up in all of this conspiracy shit, like, if she can acknowledge that there's no truth anymore, that means that she's acknowledging that something has been taken away from her. Her ability to grapple with reality has been robbed of her. And there's something truly sad, not only about somebody realizing that, but not realizing it in a way that they can actually escape from that web of misinformation. And boy, yeah, there's something heavy about that. It gives me a little bit of hope for Roseanne that, you know, she's able to think in those terms. And maybe that's the root of something, that a place where progress can be made with people who have, you know, bought into a lot of those conspiracies, is that if you can break through to a point where they acknowledge that truth has been robbed from them, then you can start to talk to them about who did that and on what terms. Yeah,
that's a fantastic point about Roseanne. Like, when even she realizes that, like, you have no way to grapple with what is real anymore, like, where does that leave the rest of us? I like what you said about Doug Stanhope exemplifying punk rock and comedy. That's a perfect way to put it. I've always described him as, like, the good example of a libertarian. What, like, libertarians purport themselves to be, or like the best case scenario version of a libertarian, right? Because I mean, for the most part, they're just Republicans who want to smoke weed, right? But it's I understand the ideal of, like, you know, everyone should take care of themselves and no one should be there for you, and you should be independent, and the government shouldn't be getting in your business and this and that. But, you know, obviously we do need things like, you know, universal health care and social services and these kind of things that fly in the face of libertarianism. And most people that are libertarians these days, unfortunately, are just loud, selfish assholes, and they use the libertarian label to, in their minds, justify or get away with their just shitty, selfish behavior. But, like, you know, obviously, as humans in society and a community, one of the things we do is help each other. That's one of the things that, you know, sets us apart from other species on the planet, or ideally should.